There's a place I used to visit in my dreams, a meadow, soft and golden, always touched by the wind. It was never quite the same, but I always knew it when I saw it. Today I'm painting that place, or maybe just how it felt. Hi there, welcome to a quiet moment with me, here at Haze and Hue. I'm a beginner watercolor painter, just a couple of months in, and I've been documenting my journey since June 25. Each video features a painting, sometimes from a tutorial, like today's piece by Maria Rachinska, paired with a gentle story to keep you company. I used to dream of a meadow, not every night and not always the same, but often enough that it became familiar, like the way you remember the path to a place you've never really been. It always appeared just after the colors began to shift in that half-sleep place, when thoughts loosened and light turned golden. There was always wind in this meadow, soft, not cold, the kind that made the long grasses sway, like they were whispering to each other. You couldn't hear what they said, of course, but you got the sense it was something kind, something old. The sky was wide, and the mountains, they were far off, sometimes barely more than a smudge of violet and grey at the edge of the world. I never walked to them. I think I knew, somehow, that the journey wasn't the point. What I remember most clearly is this, the way the air felt, as if everything in that place was breathing with you, slowly, gently. Sometimes in the dream, I'd arrive just as the sun was rising. The light would spill in like honey, thick and golden, waking the wildflowers one by one. Little purple and white blooms would open without a sound, turning their faces towards the warmth. It felt like the whole meadow was waking up with me. And sometimes I'd arrive near dusk, when the sun leaned in low and the sky turned lavender and rose. The grasses would darken then, casting long shadows across the hills. Birds would rise and turn in the sky like thoughts you couldn't quite catch. Those evenings felt more like remembering than dreaming. Once I tried to draw it. I was 9 or 10. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed with a stubby pencil, trying to sketch the slope of a hill I'd seen in my sleep. But it never looked right. I didn't have the colors, and more than that, I didn't have the silence. Because that meadow, it wasn't just a place, it was a feeling. I never saw anyone else in the meadow, but it never felt lonely. There was a sense that someone had been there just before me, like the faint trace of footsteps in the dew, or the feeling that the flowers had recently been admired. Once, I found a length of pale ribbon tied around the stem of a tall stalk of grass, faded blue, frayed at the edges. I don't know how it got there. Maybe I'd left it myself in a dream I no longer remembered. There were other small details too, just enough to keep you wondering. A stone smoothed flat, resting exactly in the middle of a sunlit patch. A tiny silver bell, half buried in the soil. And once, a page from a book. The words had blurred in the dream, but I remember the feeling it gave me, like the story had only just been paused, and I'd arrived mid-sentence. In the real world, I would sometimes wake up with the urge to write about it. I'd try to capture the feeling, but the words never fit right. They were too sharp, too exact. The meadow didn't work in sharp lines. It needed blur, haze, the way light softens when it passes through a curtain. There was a hill near the center of the meadow, not a large one, more of a gentle rise. It curved like the back of a sleeping creature, peaceful, still. I only ever climbed it once. In a dream, I still remember clearly. That morning, everything was lit in gold. Not warm gold, but the cool kind you sometimes see in early spring, when the air still holds a hint of winter and the ground is damp with quiet. I walked towards the hill slowly, barefoot, the way you do in a dream when time doesn't quite behave. The grasses brushed against my legs, some of them taller than me, nodding gently as if in greeting. At the top of the hill, I expected to see the rest of the meadow, but instead I saw a field of mirrors. Small ones, round and square and oval, standing upright like wildflowers made of glass. None of them reflected me. They showed other skies, other meadows. One shimmered with snow, another with rain. One held the colors of dusk even though it was morning. And then I heard it, the sound of distant bells, not the silver kind you find in gift shops or garden gates. These were deeper, softer, like the bells you might hear in a dream right before waking. I didn't wake up then, not yet. I just stood there among the mirrors, with the bells ringing softly through the wind. And I remember thinking, not with words, but in that deep, wordless way dreams speak, I've been here before, and I'll come again. That was the last time I dreamt of the meadow for a long while. I got older, life grew louder. My sleep became heavier, filled with calendars and emails and to-do lists, and the meadow faded like a photograph left in the sun. But I never forgot it, and every now and then, when the world grows quiet, when the sky turns the same soft lavender, or I catch the scent of wild grass on the wind, I feel it again, that hush, that warmth, that sense of being known by a place that doesn't exist. The thing is, I never knew if the meadow was a place I had imagined or remembered. Sometimes I wondered if it had belonged to someone else first, an echo passed down through dreams like a keepsake, a place stitched together from all the gentle landscapes and glimpsed in books and childhood wanderings. But it always felt like mine, not in the way you own something, but in the way something recognizes you when you arrive. And then, one spring, long after I'd stopped expecting it, I found it again. Not in sleep, but while wide awake. I was walking along a narrow trail on the edge of town. It wasn't planned. I'd taken a wrong turn, or maybe a right one, depending on how you look at it. The path was uneven, overgrown, the kind that suggests it's used more by animals than people. And there, just beyond a bend, was a clearing. The grass had grown wild and tall, dotted with purple clover and the same golden tufts that swayed in my dreams. At the far end, a line of low hills stretched into the distance, soft, just barely violet, just barely real. It wasn't the same exactly, but it had the feeling, the stillness, the breath between the breeze. I stood there longer than I meant to, long enough for the shadows to change, long enough to remember the hill from my dreams, the one I'd only climbed once. And I began to wonder, what if the meadow never really left me? What if it simply needed me to return in my own time, in my own way? Since then, I've stopped trying to chase it. Instead, I let it find me. The scent of earth after rain, the pause between questions, in the way tall grass leans when the wind is gentle. Those moments don't last, but they don't have to. They're like flickers from a lighthouse, just enough to remind you there's something waiting out there, someone that knows you, even if you've forgotten the path. And lately, I've started painting it again. Not the exact same meadow, not every flower or blade, but the feeling of it, the softness, the open sky, the possibility. And in doing that, I think I've come back. It's strange, isn't it? How a place you only visited in dreams can feel more than the ones you've lived in. I've moved houses, cities, lost track of street names and floor plans, but I never lost the feeling of that meadow. It's followed me quietly, settling into small corners of my life, in the way I arrange flowers without thinking, in the soft hum I make while painting, in how I pause now when I see the sun breaking through mist. I suppose that's how memory works, how meaning works. It doesn't ask to be framed or labeled, it just waits. And when the moment is right, it reminds you, you were here You felt something. It mattered. I've come to believe that the meadow was never about place at all. It was a way of being. It was stillness. It was curiosity, gentleness. And over time, I've tried to carry that into the waking world. Not always perfectly. I forget. I rush. I lose my way. But the meadow always seems to find me again, in small ways, in the quiet way a cup of tea warms your hands, in the hush of a page turning, in a familiar path walked without urgency. There's one moment I come back to more than any other. It's small, maybe even insignificant, but it's stayed with me. I was standing in a garden, not mine, not even one I'd been to before. It was late afternoon, and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine. There was a patch of grass that had grown wild, spilling out over a stone border, and for a second, just one, the light caught it in such a way that it glowed. Not brightly, not dramatically, but gently, like he had something to say. I didn't take a photo. I didn't write it down. I just stood there. And in that moment, I felt the meadow again. I didn't need to dream it. It was already there. I woke up early last week, earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels untouched. No footsteps yet, no hum of appliances, just that soft, padded stillness that only lives in the early hours. The windows were fogged from the warmth of the night, meeting the cold morning air. Outside, everything was hushed and grey-blue. It looked like the kind of morning you walk into by accident and don't want to disturb. I didn't check my phone. I didn't open the blinds all the way. I stood near the back door and just waited. There was birdsong, tentative at first, like the birds weren't sure the day had begun. Then it grew, layered and rising, as though they had all silently agreed that yes, now is the time. And I stepped outside barefoot into the wet grass. The cold hit instantly, sharp but clean, not a punishing cold, just enough to wake up the soles of my feet. The air had weight to it. Everything felt slowed down, like time hadn't quite begun moving yet. I wandered a little out toward the garden. Nothing looked particularly special. No dramatic blooms or misty vistas. Just a patch of overgrown herbs, a few weeds curling near the path, and soil that had been rained on recently, still dark and spongy. I noticed a patch of dandelions pushing up near the base of a pot, uninvited but cheerful, and without really planning to, I knelt down and began pulling the weeds. It wasn't a task I'd meant to do. There was no list, no deadline, just earth and hands and the simple rhythm of a tug and release. And in that quiet, unremarkable moment, I remembered the meadow. Not as a dream, not even as a memory, but as a feeling in my chest, subtle, steady, unmistakable, that same hush, that same sense that nothing was being asked of me. Only that I be here. Not productive, not interesting, not impressive, just present. It's hard to explain, really, because nothing happened, and yet everything shifted. I wasn't chasing anything. I wasn't escaping anything. I was just there, completely, not thinking ahead, not rewinding the day before. And I thought, this is what's changed. Not the world, not the garden, but the way I move through it now. The meadow taught me that. Not all at once, not even consciously, but over time it planted something in me. A different pace, a quieter rhythm, a new kind of attention. I started noticing the little things again, like how the light hits the floor differently in the early afternoon, or the pause between bird calls, or the way water ripples when you swirl a brush just once and let it settle. Those details used to float past me. Now I stop, not always, but more than I used to. And I don't feel like I'm missing out anymore. In fact, I think I used to miss so much more when I filled every moment with sound, with motion, with plans. I think the world trains us to rush, to chase, to feel, to consume. But there's nothing radical about slowing down, something bold in choosing softness, in letting a moment just be. That morning in the garden, I stayed until my knees were damp and the sun had finally lifted over the fence line. By then the air had warmed and the birds were quieter again. It was like the world had officially started and I had gotten a head start, not by being busy, but by simply showing up early and being still. Since then, I've carried that moment with me, not in a grand or dramatic way, but in the little things. I pause before I paint just to breathe. I let water sit longer on the paper before adding pigment. I watch the colors bloom without rushing them to dry. It's not about doing less. It's about being in what I'm doing, completely. And I think that's what the meadow gave me. Not a location, not a dream to return to, but a way of seeing, a way of moving, a quiet reminder that enoughness already exists all around us if we are slow enough to feel it. Before we wrap up, I just wanted to share a few thoughts about the painting itself. I really enjoyed working with the wet and wet technique in this one. There's something calming about watching the colors spread and soften into each other. It feels a bit like letting go of control, which fits the mood of this piece. That said, I think I went a little heavy with the masking fluid. Some of the paper peeled when I removed it, especially in the spots where I applied it too thickly. It's one of those things I'll keep in mind for next time. There are definitely areas I like to improve. Some shapes weren't as clear as I imagined, and I think I lost a bit of the contrast I wanted in the foreground. But honestly, I'm still glad I tried. Each painting feels like a step forward, even when it doesn't turn out exactly how I pictured it. And there's something really satisfying about seeing it come together, especially alongside the story. Thanks for spending this quiet moment with me. If you enjoyed the painting or the story, I'd love to have you join me again. Until next time, let the quiet moments inspire you.